Mr. Gene Grilli, Vice President for Administration and Chief Financial Officer, will now introduce our commencement speaker.
The Honorable Timothy Murphy, a member of the 114th United States Congress and 1974 graduate of Wheeling Jesuit University, was first elected in 2002. He is now serving in his 7th term in the United States House of Representatives, representing the 18th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. I'm pleased to add that it is the district in which my wife Sandy and I reside. His impressive intellect and his strong desire to serve others, which were nurtured and encouraged on this campus 40 years ago, remains a central part of his life and work today. This is not to say that he spent all of his time on campus in the library. He met his wife Nan, also a WJU alum, on campus when they were both undergraduates. Wheeling Jesuit University's only alum currently serving as a member of Congress, Representative Murphy earned a master's degree from Cleveland State University and a doctorate from the University of Pittsburgh. Congressman Murphy holds a senior position on the House Energy and Commerce Committee as Chairman of Oversight and Investigations. He also serves as the co-chair of the Mental Health Caucus and was a founding member of the GOP Doctors Caucus, a position which he uses to educate other members of Congress and the public on ways to make health care more affordable and accessible to families. In addition to his work on Capitol Hill, Lieutenant Commander Murphy serves in the Navy Reserve Medical Service Corps as a psychologist with service members with traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. It is my honor to present to you a man whose life embodies the mission of Wheeling Jesuit University, educating for life, leadership, and service. The Honorable Timothy Murphy.
Thank you. Well, it's great to be back here. I remember the days when we didn't have a gym and I was in a band and I played guitar in the old gym or up in Swint Hall. I was in our drama group called the Caviar Club. I don't know where the name came from, but playing Macbeth. Or, thank goodness in those days we did not have cell phones to take pictures when I played Oberon, King of the Fairies in Midsummer Night's Dream. There's something to be said for getting away with wearing black tights, but I digress. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. And to the students, yeah. It's a nice present for your parents to graduate. This is good. All their money is not for want. However, they all stood when you came in the room. May I suggest you give parents a standing ovation? Yeah. Good job. Now, we're feeling pretty good. We're feeling fine. I want to tell you a little about feeling fine is relative. So, Seamus, an Irishman, was on trial in Dublin for insurance fraud. And counsel was interrogating him and said, Seamus, here you are on insurance fraud, and isn't it true on the day in question, when the police officer, known as the Garda, came up to you and said, how you feeling? You said you were feeling fine, and now here you are making these claims of all of these injuries. What do you have to say for yourself? Seamus said, Your Honor, if I may speak. You see, on the day in question, I took my best milking cow, Elizabeth, and I put her on a trailer, and I was taking her into town to sell her. That's got nothing to do with what you're here for, Seamus. Tell the truth. Isn't it true on the day in question you said you were feeling fine? Nobody cares about your milking cow. Your Honor, if I could continue, said Seamus. I had Elizabeth on the trailer, driving her into town, when suddenly a truck comes through the intersection at the roundabout and crashes into us. That's it, said counsel. Your Honor, make him answer the question I've given him. To which the judge says, Seamus, I'm interested in your cow. What happened? Thank you, Your Honor. A fine man indeed you are to recognize a good milker. So there we were. The truck came by and hit the trailer. Old Elizabeth, she gets spun in the air, does several somersaults, lands in a ditch on one side of the road. I'm in a ditch on the other. We're both battered, bruised, and broken. I see her there, out of the corner of my swollen eye with blood coming out of my forehead. And I hear her mooing and wailing. Oh, it was a sad thing indeed. And after a while, along down the road comes the guard, and he gets out of his car, and of course he hears Elizabeth first because of her loud moans. He says, oh, you poor cow. You look miserable. I'll put you out of your misery. And takes out a gun and he blows her brains out. And then he sees me on the other side of the road, and with his hot gun still in his hand, he says, Seamus, how are you feeling? I said I was feeling fine. It's relative. You know, speaking at a graduation is a great honor. You hope to say something meaningful and inspiring and lasting, or at least I want to say something meaningful and inspiring and lasting. You want to get out of here. So, but please give me a few moments to pass on some lessons that I learned from being a student here at Wheeling and on in life. Now, you all may remember the movie Saving Private Ryan, right? Tom Hanks, remember his last words? Earn this. After traveling through Europe, trying to find one Private Ryan so he could be reunited with his mother, so many of his squad were killed trying to do that. But his last words as he looked at Private Ryan was, earn this. So it comes down to this: if you only have a few moments to live, and in your last breaths, what would you want to pass on to those around you that you love? I'm going to offer you a few. Here's the first one. Life is tough, deal with it. Now, we hear a lot about the millennials. You know, they like to have social media and work together, and we have helicopter parents. I'm a helicopter parent. Okay, I admit it, I am. I hover around my daughter, but you're on your own. You got to deal with it. Pampered is not going to be part of it. It's not going to be easy. No parents wish for kids to have a legacy of saying, can you come and rescue me again? Life smacks you down, you got to get up. Dust yourself off, lift your head up, put your eyes on your sights, and go for it. It's kind of like when Xavier was told by Ignatius, I need you to go to the east and I want you to convert people out there. Ignatius didn't say, I don't know the language, I don't have the right clothes, and my gosh, I don't have an app for that, what am I going to do? He just said, okay, let's go. Now, I don't want to sound insensitive or incompassionate, but what parent that loves their children would sometimes say, you're going to learn to swim and I'm going to throw you in the water? Well, you can't be the weak link because the chain is only as strong as that weakest link. So if you think you can't, you can't. If you think you might, maybe. But if you say you will, you will. Number 2, do something worthy of your time and your talent. Do something of your work, your learning, your education. Maybe you could build a building. Maybe you can teach another generation. Maybe you could be of service to your community. Maybe you'll have a new discovery. But whatever that will be, it will make more sense if you follow things in the Jesuit tradition. Question the impact of your work. I drive my colleagues crazy all the time. And I didn't really understand this till some years later. I read Chris Lowney's book, Heroic Leadership. And after 4 years of Jesuit high school and 4 years of Jesuit education, I said, oh, that's what they were trying to teach me. Question, discern, think about it. What is the impact of what you do? Good intentions don't necessarily yield good results. And let me give you 2 examples. Anybody here in pre-med or nursing? All right. Can you name the vital signs? What are they? Someone stand up and shout it out. Come on. You can't name them? What are they? Pain. Yes, that's it. Thank you. All right. Good. It works, see? Now, let me tell you what happened. In 2004, when the American Medical Association and others said, we need to have pain as a vital sign. Made sense. Then what happened is they said physicians who don't ask and nurses who don't ask about pain are really committing malpractice. You don't want to send a patient home in pain. But what happened was they didn't think of the consequences. You know, now when someone goes to an emergency room, they grade the hospital. They fill out a form. And if the hospital doesn't have good grades for how they handle pain, they may not get a higher rate of reimbursement. So what happens, the hospital tells the doctors, take care of their pain. And then what happens? 17% of patients who visit an emergency room leave with an opiate. And what we have seen in the last few years is a huge increase in addiction rates in America. Last year, 43,000 people in this country died of drug overdoses. The number of people with addictions is growing. And that is, of course, a serious problem. We have to think of the consequences. I know once when I was in Iraq, I was in a rollover accident, and battlefield medicine is you just take care of the pain and ship them out. So there I am in some field. Next thing you know, I'm in an ambulance, then I'm in a helicopter, and everybody's always asking me, are you in pain? On a scale of 1 to 10, where are you? And I had a concussion too, and I was saying, I don't know, I think 8, I don't know, 9, I hurt. And so, I didn't realize, give them more morphine, slap a fentanyl patch on them, take this Oxycontin, try some of this Percocet, here's a Tylenol just to be good measure. And that continued on, and after a couple weeks, and I'm totally loopy and back in the United States, couldn't think straight, and I said, what am I on? And I just ripped the fentanyl patch off, stopped taking the medication, and you have a withdrawal reaction because your body gets used to that. But be careful what you do because it has consequences, because unfortunately a lot of people out there are getting worse. Here's another thing. I remember when I was a student, I did a little internship at that time at a little psychiatric hospital called Roney's Point. I don't even know if it still exists. At that time, we had a lot of psychiatric hospitals we were trying to empty out because we realized these places that may have begun as homes of compassion to take care of the mentally ill became dumping grounds, asylums. People were locked up and abused. And so we emptied them out. But what happened? We didn't take care of them. We ended up with places that for care for people that really became worse. Because we said people have a right to refuse care. We forgot to say they have a right to get treatment. So what happens? 40 to 60% of people in prisons are mentally ill. The vast majority of people who are homeless, mentally ill. A huge proportion of those who visit emergency rooms in crisis, mentally ill. And our cemeteries are filled with the 40,000 people who died last year of suicide. We have to think of the consequences of how things are connected. But in so doing, and that's part of the Jesuit tradition, you realize that if you take your talent and your time and question and do something worthwhile, you can make a big difference. I want you to be that person at work who is sometimes the pain in the neck and saying, hey, wait a minute, I don't know if we should do this. It may have unforeseen consequences. You should be that person. You should be so lucky. It's a good thing to do as a Jesuit student. Number 3, learn real life skills for which there is no app. Now, I was amazed the other day. I was with someone and I said, do you know anything about the weather? The person took out cell phone, began typing in right away, pulled up weather maps, temperature, humidity, and wind, and was struggling. Says, it's not working. What do you mean? I can't tell. I said, here's an idea. Look out the window. And I was for a walk with this young man, and I said, do you know anything about how to tell the weather? By looking at the clouds, by smelling the air? By doing anything like that? He said, no, I don't know. So it's important to learn real life skills. How to change a spark plug or change the oil on your lawnmower. I told my son-in-law before he got married I was going to give him a test on these things. He got very panicked. I don't know how to change the oil, he said. You'll be okay. I'll walk you through this. But the issue is here to learn those real life skills so you know what happens as being a leader when you can really do those things. It becomes part of how people will see you as really having a solid education and not just something you can swing by on. You'll also then be able to know what is right and wrong because your eyes will be up here, not down here. You'll know that. You'll be able to understand when things are wrong, when people have acted wrong. So, work on that. Number 4, have a strong faith and grow in that faith every day and make that your moral compass. You know, in the statuary hall at the U.S. Capitol, if any of you have ever been there, It's the old House chamber. It's filled with statues of great Americans, great leaders. It's amazing history in that room. John Quincy Adams' seat was there. Abraham Lincoln's seat was there, and several other people that went on to be presidents of the United States. It shows where they were. Can you imagine the echoes in that room of their debates as they stood and debated everything from slavery to shipping agreements to deals with other countries? It's also, with the statues there, it's encircled by people men and women who've led our nation to great accomplishments in law, science, education, justice, and religion. And we're in awe of their actions. Some stood up and fought for freedom as soldiers. And there's one woman there who sat down in a bus and said, "I'm not moving because of freedom." But the sum of all their accomplishments at 10 times 10 times 10 pale in comparison to what God calls you to do. What He asks you to do is not easy, and you should ask God to not give you an easy task. We pray and reach out to those whose lives are empty and meaningless, for the lost, the least, the last, and the lonely. And that is a responsibility you have. Not pity. Nobody can eat on pity. Nobody can be stronger on pity. It is up to you to be the best you can so that you can reach out with a hand of strength to lift them up, to serve the Lord not just with words, but through the gospel of action. That's your duty, by being the best and strongest you can be. When we answer that call, we're always reminded of how weak we are. I know in the House of Representatives, a lot of times people call upon us and say, "Pass this law, do this, do that." Sometimes I say something that's politically incorrect and say, "Can you do it yourself?" I literally had someone say to me, "I want you to call the local community because this sign out here has got grass all around it and they really ought to plant some flowers and make it look nice." I said, "Why don't you do it? Get a weed whacker out there, dig it up, plant some flowers, do it yourself." He didn't like my comment, but it seems to me it would have made a lot more sense for him to step and be part of the community. And recognize in Congress what we cannot do is we cannot legislate character, we cannot mandate conscience, and we cannot litigate compassion. You have to do that, and you're called by your faith to do that. We have to acknowledge our own doubt, our own ignorance. Self-assuredness is something that makes us blind. But through hope, there is light. Through humility, there is strength. Through prayer, there is courage. Through faith, wisdom, and through grace, joy. So call upon the Lord to help you seek the answers to the questions that are still puzzling us, to find new roads in a light that is often so dim you can barely see, to be strengthened by God in that darkness and ask for guidance towards new solutions, towards the unknown horizons and that new tomorrow. Challenge yourself in these issues, no matter how high the mountains or how low the valleys. Stay focused on what is important. And while others may tempt you and get sidetracked and go other ways, you've got to make this your fundamental choice every day. So, you want to experience real joy? Serve the Lord. And it is when you make that choice and you say out loud, "As for me and my house, I will serve the Lord," and you do that for the greater glory of God, ad majorem Dei gloriam, now you are a Jesuit student. So, let me bring this around to another point, because things are connected, sometimes in ways we don't understand. Two men are out hunting in the field, and while hunting through this field, they come to the edge of the woods and they see a sinkhole. And one of them says, "That's a pretty deep hole." He picks up a rock, throws it in. He doesn't hear anything. "That's a very deep hole. I'm a little worried about this." He starts to walk away. Another said, "Wait a minute. Here's an anvil. Let's pick up this anvil together. We'll throw it in the hole and see if we can hear it." So they picked up this anvil, dropped in the hole, and listened. Nothing. "This is scary," they said. "Back away." So they backed away. And a few seconds later, this goat comes charging through the field at high speed, 30, 40. He must have been doing 50 miles an hour, jumps into that hole, and is gone. And the hunters say, "This is too weird. Let's just get out of here." And they're walking back through the field, and they see a farmer scratching his head and says, "Hey, y'all seen my goat?" They said, "Hey, we just saw a goat running through the field. A white goat with horns?" Yeah, that's him. He just jumped down into this big sinkhole. We couldn't believe it." He He said, couldn't have been. I had him tied to an anvil. And now back to our show. Point number 5. Be courageous. Be courageous. Fight back. Our faith is under attack. Our culture is under attack. Our families are under attack. We're not just transitioning. People are looking to destroy the things you learned and the values you seek. There are those who will mock your strength, who tell you that your focus on doing what is right is actually wrong. They'll continue unless you stand up. Anger and hate can lead a person to push someone else in front of a train. Courage and love can lead you to be the one that jumps in front of that train to save a life. Greater love hath no man. Now, it's not going to be easy, but please don't sit this one out. Stand up for your family, for your country. Don't just watch. You can't philosophize through this. Fight back. And if you think you don't have the courage, let me tell you this. So I'm a Navy Reserve officer. He said I work at Walter Reed Hospital on a unit, an inpatient unit for people with traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder. And I've seen too many people wounded, missing eyes and parts of their brain and arms and legs. I've gone to too many funerals. And besides, speaking of speaking up, would you do me a favor? Next time someone's singing the alma mater and you see the person next to you not like this, give them a little nudge and say, put your hand up there. People died for that. The least you can do is this. Just a reminder. Be courageous and tell people that. So what happens sometimes, I don't know how many times, but it happens too often than not, when a soldier comes back pretty severely wounded, sometimes girlfriend or boyfriend will say, hey, I'm not in on this, I'm out of here. I have seen cases where someone walks away from their spouse, takes the car, cleans out the bank account, takes the kids away, and they abandon someone after someone has given so much. And so I worry sometimes. I understand here, I've never happened to me here, but I understand it's an overwhelming thing when this happens to you. Well, one time I was working with a soldier who had a terrible head wound in his left hemisphere. And I was talking to his wife, a lovely young lady, about the consequences of this. And I was describing to her what had happened and what would happen. Now imagine yourself in this position that you are his spouse. Think about this. I said, you know, from the IED blast, he got an injury to his frontal lobe. His personality has changed. Some of it's coming back. I don't know how soon or how much, but there's differences about him. And because it also affected his temporal lobe, his Wernicke's areas, and his Broca's area, he speaks with a strange speech, sort of like someone who has had a stroke. It's hard to understand. He struggles to pronounce words. But you notice he's getting better. And I don't know how soon or how much, but he'll improve. And because the parts of his temporal lobe that also affect understanding speech, he can't understand sarcasm or satire or metaphors. He has to be very concrete. He's getting better. And I don't know how much. I don't know how soon. But we'll continue to work with him to find improvement. But it's not done. And his parietal lobe, it left him hemiplegic. He had just recently learned to stand up again and take steps. His right hand wouldn't zip a zipper again, would never write again, wouldn't button a button, couldn't shave, couldn't brush his teeth. But he said his left hand will take over. He'll improve. And we'll do everything we can to help him be the best that he can. Now imagine hearing that. As tears welled in her eyes, she said, you know, I don't mean to sound insensitive, but I'm jealous of those wives whose husbands don't come home. because they can start over. So I mean no harm here. And I'm glad he's home. But I sent this handsome young soldier to war, and I don't know who this man is that came back with his name. I don't know him. Now, tears are in my eyes too, and I'm fearing the worst. And I said, "What will you do?" She sat up a little straighter, put her shoulders back, and said, "I made that decision on my wedding day." And she said, "If it takes me 50 years, I will teach him to laugh and to love again." That is courage under fire. When someone goes into battle, they hope they don't hear the bullets overhead. They hope they don't take one. But think about her life. Every morning when she gets up, every day, and every night when she goes to bed. Will her husband have seizures? What problems will he have in the morning? But she has not abandoned him. Let her be your hero. Or find a hero that's better. And understand in those moments of courage, you have to be the one to stand up, to say, "This isn't right. I'm not going to do that. I'm taking this path. I'm using prayer. I'm sucking up and I'm moving forward." We cannot comfortably sneak back into our corners. We have to run towards the cries of those who need help. You have to march towards that sound of the bugle that's telling you what is the location of that battle. Not to do that which is easy, but to purposely choose that which is difficult. There is a horizon out there, and it is yours. Set your sails, mark your compass, and go get it before your last breath. God bless.